The game of life and the game of business can be quite challenging and difficult at times, but with clear intent, strong relationships, and a fair amount of practice, we can be successful. My name is Matt Abrahams, and I teach strategic communication at Stanford Graduate School of Business. Welcome to Think Fast, Talk Smart, the podcast. Today, I am really excited to speak with Andrew Luck. Andrew is a former NFL quarterback known for his exceptional leadership and strategic thinking on the field. Andrew is also a Stanford graduate with an undergraduate degree in architectural design and recently a master's degree in education. As quarterback for Stanford, Andrew led his team to multiple victories, and he continued this trend while playing professionally for the Indianapolis Colts, where he earned 4 Pro Bowl selections and the 2018 NFL Comeback Player of the Year award. So, Andrew, thank you for joining us. It is a true pleasure to chat with you. I have to share that I've watched many of your games here at Stanford and certainly on TV many, many more. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Excellent. Should we get started?
Please.
Excellent. As a quarterback, clear communication is crucial with your teammates, your coaches, the press, and your fans. Are there specific strategies and tactics you found help you communicate more effectively with clarity and accuracy when you're in those high-stress situations?
Communicating with fans or the media is a lot different than communicating with teammates in game, which is a lot different than communicating with coaches when you're in the room during the week preparing for a big game. So a lot of different ecosystems of communication. I will say with teammates, I think I learned clarity was really important. And it was as much nonverbal as verbal. Mm-hmm. You know, like a young quarterback walking into a professional locker room, I had to earn veterans' respect so they would listen to me. I mean, that was a simple equation in my mind. So I got to go build some equity. I got to show up every day. I got to be consistent. I got to be the first one out there. I have to work hard. I have to show guys I'm holding up my end of the bargain so that when I ask you to, as a quarterback, which you're often asked, or give orders, call a play, that you feel like there's a respect there. So I very much believed in that with my teammates. And the media was another interesting part. Difficult, certainly, to speak to the media 2 or 3 or 4 times a week. Starting as a young professional, even in college when you're speaking. But I think also there's a level of accountability that you just have to eventually own when you speak publicly about your performance, your team's performance, about an issue, about a good thing, about a bad thing. And so speaking to the media, I always felt that I needed to keep things about myself. Pointing fingers was not going to be a good thing, especially not towards teammates, and take responsibility for things. That's how you move on and try to be as authentic as possible. And I certainly didn't do it perfectly by any means, but getting up there and not lying, it also helps.
Yes. Yeah. So something you said there that I think is really important for all of us to think about, beyond clarity and being truthful and own what you can own and not others, the notion of establishing part of the bargain or the equity that you have. And that's work you have to do right away. And in some cases, we can do that ahead of time in terms of how we set expectations for the meetings that we have or the conversations. But really, many of us go into these high-stress situations thinking about what we want to say, not necessarily about the relationship we need to build in advance of it. And I think that's really an important point.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. I don't think I've thought of that explicitly. But I think that's part of why I love team sports.
Yeah.
The relationship is at the core of teammate. Of locker room culture, of going out there together. I mean, I think it maybe activates some type of primal tribalism in us in a positive way, not the negative side necessarily. And I learned that you internalize that very early on when you play team sports, football, basketball, baseball. I can't succeed without you. You can't succeed without me. We've got to put the work in. And when it's going to get tough, because it does, if we respect each other, if we've been there for each other, there's a better chance we figure it out together.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to me that on a sports team in particular, but much like our teams at school or at work, that you have some intense work you're doing, a project or a meeting, things can get rough or go well, and then you have to retool and get ready for the next time. So it's not just what you say in that moment, but it's the impact of that for the subsequent moments that you also have to consider. Sports, I think, are a crucible for the things that we deal with on a daily basis. One of the things that I've always admired when I've watched you play is you seem to stay very calm in a lot of those situations where I certainly know, one, I would never be in those situations, but it would be really hard for me to stay calm. Many of us find ourselves in situations in our lives, our careers, where it's really intense around us. What do you do to stay calm? How do you center yourself in that?
That's interesting that your observations, I stay calm. I can certainly look back and think of times I did not feel very calm come off the sidelines and throw a helmet down in frustration or let some emotion out. And I think one, as a player, I learned that it was okay to play emotionally. Like my personality did not needed to play with emotion. I enjoyed, that's part of what made sports fun, the highs and the lows.
Sure.
Now, and there was a level of, hey, when you walk in the huddle and call a play, you've got to sort of become a clinician. It is business. You're on it. And the only way I learned to do that was to practice that. I had fantastic coaches, starting with my dad in Pop Warner football, high school coaches that were really influential, in the state of Texas puts resources into coaching and football especially. And I was a beneficiary of that. I had Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw at Stanford. I had amazing coaches in the NFL, and we practiced those high-pressure situations all the time. I think there's a romantic notion I held growing up, that you rise to the occasion, you rise to these great moments. And I certainly think that's true. You watch great athletes, great folks doing things like they're going to show up. But I think something that is as much true is you settle to the level of your training. You settle to the level what your habits are, and that I really internalized that at Stanford with how we practiced. I mean, practice had a sense of urgency, had pressure. There were stakes at practice. I mean, there was competitive. If we wanted to go out and compete on game day, it wasn't a flip a switch and go. We learned to compete on the practice field. We learned to compete against each other. We learned the at least as a quarterback, I learned the physiological response. Can I control my breathing to call a play clearly, succinctly, with some level of positive affect to my teammates? So we have a collective belief we can go and get this fourth down or score a touchdown here. So I think practicing that and having some awareness of that this is what we're practicing for helped my growth, helped my career.
It sounds like awareness not only of the moment in those situations, but also awareness what's going on in your body and being able to respond to that, either amp it up or calm it down through breath work or other things. That notion of practice, so many of us don't envision that we can practice these everyday situations. If I've got a high-stakes meeting where I'm trying to sell or present something, maybe it makes sense to practice with somebody and get some feedback so we can rise up, as you said, to the level that practice provides us. So a lot of us think of practice as something that's a nice thing to do if we have the time, but don't purposefully do it. I mean, my hunch is you've spent many, many more hours in practice than you have in the actual game.
Absolutely. and frankly, I'm 5 years out or so now from play. I miss practice. Practice was fun. It was like a mini game day. There's a great line from Marvin Harrison, a wide receiver, Hall of Famer, who I didn't play with, but he was on the Colts, through sort of my fandom of middle school, high school. And he said, I get paid to practice. I'd play a game for free, right? I love that. I mean, I truly, and when I think of the great quarterbacks that I grew up watching, like Peyton Manning or Stephen Ayer or Tom Brady, I mean, you hear stories about their intensity of practice and what they brought to the table, and I wanted to embody that as well.
That notion of being paid to practice is an interesting one. I think if all of us think about our jobs, the performance aspect, but it's really the pre-work that where we're earning our money and earning our keep. You've been praised for your leadership both on and off the field. How would you describe your leadership style, and what are some important qualities you see in effective leaders?
I love to play football, and I think loving what I was doing helped. Certainly when you play the quarterback position, and this starts from Pop Warner football, I mean, eyes are on you. So you are given a leadership role.
Right.
There's no way around it. You're barking out orders. You're calling plays. You're telling people what to do. The ball is in your hand every play. You are responsible for that. You're pulling strings to a sense. But it's not just enough to be given that role. You have to earn it. So I very much believed, as mentioned earlier, that earning equity with teammates. And I don't mean that in the transactional way. I mean, like respecting each other, being consistent with each other, being accountable to each other. Those strike a deep nerve in the idea of who I am, of being a good teammate. So I always thought I had to be the best teammate I could be before being a decent leader. I think personality-wise, I'm conflict averse, and so that was something as I got older, including especially professionally. I had to learn you can't avoid certain levels of conflict, and you can come out the other side, and both parties can be better at the end of the day, and that's part of your job as a leader and growing as a leader to lean into the sort of character weaknesses, if you will, and then I was profoundly impacted by my college coaches, Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw, and something Jim Harbaugh really helped me with was he empowered the quarterback. And he empowered the quarterback to have their own personality. I felt like I could go play with my personality, and it didn't have to be a mirror image of what Jim Harbaugh was, right? It didn't have to be a mirror image of what Joe Montana was or Peyton Manning was or Tom Brady. I think he knew as a coach who played the position that the quarterback has to feel like they belong out on the field. And that means bringing your whole personality to it. And so that had a profound impact on me. That's what I think about when I think of young quarterbacks, and I volunteer coach in high school of making sure I'm not stamping my ego on who I think they should be, but empowering them, and their personalities to go out and succeed as much as they can.
I definitely want to touch on your coaching that you do now in a little bit, but several things that I heard there that I think are really important to call out. Teammate first, that you're part of the team, and that connection allows you to be a more successful leader, and being yourself, figuring out what works for you and who you are, and that allows you to become the leader that you can possibly be. I have to admit, I find it a little surprising that somebody who plays a highly competitive, combative game, if you will, was conflict averse. Tell me a little bit more about that. And I'm because I also am conflict averse, but I didn't play professional football. How did you manage that? How did you learn to lean into that?
Yeah, I abhor arguing with people.
Okay.
Discussing things with people is a lot of fun, but I think especially as a younger guy and as my personality, that's it's not what I wanted. But I also think there's a distinction from the competitive, combative side of football, and maybe part of what was fun about playing contact sports for me, like football or basketball, and getting down there was that I could. I didn't have to be nice per se. It was okay to step on toes. It was okay to get there. It's okay to bring a level of intensity in at times in your face-ness, if you will. And so I do think sports helped me sort of identify, conflict averse a little, and you can work on it and you can grow on it, and you have to. I mean, you have to when you're on a team. Right. You get a locker room of 100 guys in college, there are going to be issues. You get a locker room of 50 professionals, there are issues. There might be different issues, but there are issues. And I'll say this as well, as I felt this at Stanford and felt this in the NFL, and later on, especially in the NFL, like, at times when I struggled, I had this notion that I was the only leader, and it all felt, and it couldn't have been more false of a notion, and it got me in trouble, right? The best teams I know had an amazing group of leaders, all with different personalities, all who rose in different ways or took over in different ways, and all who complemented sort of the deficiencies of each other and the strengths of each other. And I think of guys that I played with at Stanford, like Michael Thomas and Owen Marisic and David DeCastro and Delano Howell. I mean, we all had our own styles, but we worked together. We respected each other, and it was better for the locker room. A lot better for the locker room. And you need an ego to play quarterback. You do. There's no way around it. But that ego's got to stay in check.
Right.
Yeah.
So That notion of respecting others, seeking out others to compliment and support, that I hadn't thought of that, but that's one way to become more comfortable with conflict, when you respect those around you and others are willing to step up when people need to step up. And the other thing I heard you say that got me thinking is, you found, as somebody who is conflict averse, playing sports allowed you to actually explore that being in conflict and seeing positive results come. Perhaps others of us can look for other areas of our lives where, if we don't feel comfortable in our work environment being a little confrontational or being assertive, maybe there's some other areas of our lives where we can practice that, get more comfortable, and that's an. Your playing sports might have helped you outside of sports to be more comfortable.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and it's an interesting notion. And I will say this, playing sports and how important practice is.
Yeah.
You know, I've talked to some young folks and folks who play, and I've seen some articles about this. I think, you know, because we film everything now, because we have phones out, practice really needs to be a psychologically safe and physically safe space, because you try stuff.
Right.
And you fail.
Yeah.
You look stupid. I mean, and younger folk and high school kids, they're afraid of people filming them and showing the world.
Right.
And we need to make sure, I think, that we still put boundaries up around what are the psychologically safe spaces to go out and try things. To, if you're conflict averse, to what does it mean to, you know, get into it with a teammate in a positive way. It's not going to be pretty all the time, but it needs to be safe.
Absolutely. And I see this personally in the work I do. I teach communication skills, and I'm encouraging people to try new things to see what works and what doesn't, and setting that tone and that space where people can take risks. I like to joke that my class is like a high school chemistry class, where sometimes the experiments blow up and sometimes they don't, and you learn in either case.
Absolutely.
And you have to have that environment.
Absolutely. And I should add, filming was also how we learned a lot in football, but not filming for the internet and the whole world to see.
Exactly.
You need a different style.
Exactly. Your decision to retire from the NFL in 2019 surprised a lot of fans and players alike. Many of us in our careers have news to share that's going to have direct impact on our colleagues. Once you made that decision to retire, what was your thought process on how to communicate that? Did you tell some people before it became public? What was that process like? Because we can all learn from that.
No, it's a great question. You know, one, going through that process, I did not seal myself off in a vacuum. Like my girlfriend, now wife, was very much involved. My family, my folks that were in the inner circle. So I did not feel alone going through the most difficult decision in my life, and I'm very thankful that I didn't, because there was a time in my career dealing with injuries and others that I felt alone. And even though people around me, loneliness was a difficult feeling, and I wasn't willing to admit myself, but had the chance to grow and learn from that era, and made sure that during deciding to retire, that it was, I was involving the folks that I loved, trusted, and respected. And then when I decided to retire, again, it was the hardest decision of my life, certainly, and the one I needed to make.
Right.
We were going to have a press conference on a Sunday afternoon, and we had a preseason football game the Saturday night before that I was not going to play in. And so and it wasn't going to be a celebratory press conference, right? This wasn't like you've won a bunch of Super Bowls and you're going off, but I knew I needed to write something down and collect my thoughts and at least put, I don't know if it's the ritual we want or the words or what it is, but it felt like, this was the step to take. So I wrote some stuff down throughout the week, sort of some drafts. I sent it to our PR guy at the Colts, and just thoughts and thankful. I wanted to make sure people knew that I was grateful for certain things and most things, frankly. So that press conference was going to be for Sunday afternoon. Again, not celebratory, but word leaked out. Word leaked out during the Saturday night preseason game with about 7-8 minutes left to go. Ooh. And so I felt, it was an odd feeling. I felt cameras turn to me, and something's not, this is out. Thankfully, go back to teammates. Friday evening and Saturday morning, I had spent time reaching out to the 10 guys, 8 to 10 guys on the team that I'd played with for a long time, and that I loved and respected and felt very much tethered to with friendship. And kinship and all that. And we sat and shared, and different guys in different ways and other guys in other ways, and some we had a little more time, some we didn't. One of my teammates was involved through the whole process and knew, and others, and called some folks as well. But so So when the news broke Saturday night, I was grateful for two things because it was a surprise. Right. So I was grateful for two things, and there was a lesson in there as well. So grateful, one, that I had told my friends and teammates that I felt like they needed to know. And it was impossible to be able to tell the whole team, but I got to the guys that I needed to get to. Two, I was grateful I'd been working on this draft and sitting to the PR guy because I had a speech ready to go for the impromptu press conference at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night in a T-shirt, et cetera. And then the lesson I learned is if the more people you tell, news like this gets out. I mean, if you start involving this and that and lawyers and this, if you tell too many folks, news is going to get out. It is especially in a industry like the NFL that in large part is what it is because of the media machine behind it and the ability to dominate the media world. But yeah, that's sort of a little bit behind the curtain of what that process was like.
Well, I know the decision sounds like it was very difficult to make, but it sounds like you did some things that were very wise. One, you spent some time thinking about it in advance in terms of what you might communicate, and you reached out to others. I'm hearing a theme across all your answers that it's about connection, it's about relying on others, it's about relationships, and many of the examples you use in terms of who you are, how you played, and even how you left the game that you love was through connecting with others. And I think that's really powerful. And a lot of us can think about that when we make career moves. Connecting with others we know, thinking about how we want to message it is really important. Congratulations are in order. You recently graduated with a master's degree in education. You came back to campus, something that some people might find surprising. I guess I'm curious on several things. One, what motivated you to return to education and return to Stanford? And share a little bit about what you studied and what maybe one or two takeaways you had. Coming back to school after being a professional athlete, I can imagine, is very different than the first time you were here at this place.
Absolutely. Well, one, coming back here, my wife and I met here as freshmen. We were in the same dorm together. And we knew our two daughters were born in Indiana after I'd retired, and we knew we were ready for that next chapter in life, and we both felt these were joint decisions we were making, and I know this is about communication. I realized learning to communicate in a relationship, and holding up my end of the bargain has been way harder than any other endeavor. It's different than being a quarterback, but we knew this was sort of where our next step needed to be, and I took a couple years off and was just a dad, and COVID hit in that very odd time for all, and was fortunate to just be able to hunker down and not have to do anything. And so, but we were ready for the next step. I knew I wanted to challenge myself and learn. I certainly wanted to get back into an academic setting with cool people and interesting people, and we love Stanford, so decided to come out here. I did spend a lot of time thinking about the role sports plays and how kids grow up in this country, in locker room culture, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Football, sort of how sports and K through 12 education intertwine, which in this country is a big deal. I mean, no other place in the world has what we have with high school sports or middle school sports, and the extracurriculars and theater and band. So I just had sort of big, a little bit of amorphous questions about those, and wanted to go study. And I wanted to be around new people. I'd been in locker rooms my whole life. I wanted to go see what class was like as a graduate student with different. And I was in a locker room with men my whole life. I needed to be in class with women and others. And I needed my perspective to be challenged. And I think so. I was craving a little bit of that challenge to open up ideas.
So share with us an idea or two that you now think of differently, having matriculated through a graduate program versus maybe what you came with. Yeah,
well, one, I'm thankful for my cohort that I was with, and I was in the Policy, Organization, and Leadership Studies program under Professor Jaquith, and it was fantastic. Great folks from all over the country, internationally. I think, one, I have learned not to rush to judgment unless I feel like I am the expert in the opinion of the matter at hand. So you ask me about third down as a quarterback, I'll rush to judgment to do something. But it's probably worth asking someone and do some research about things, because you will learn. You will learn, and you more often will learn the reasons why behind things are, and whether you agree with them or not. That's that. And two, education in general. I think the distinction between what a private good is and a public good is, and that paradigm, thinking about private goods and public goods, has helped shaped my perspective when thinking about K through 12 education, higher ed, where sports plays a role in it, and what public goods are in our country.
What do you see yourself doing in this vein? Are you going to continue to do things around education, or do you know what's next?
Well, I'm loving volunteering, coach high school football, and can see myself doing that for, who knows long. I thought I'd be playing football till I was 45, like Tom Brady, and that changed quick. So, but I am enjoying volunteering, coaching high school football at Pally High, which is right down the road from this studio. It's a blast. I'm thankful for the coaches there. I get to learn from them. I get to learn and grow, and the kids and athletes are amazing. And I get to help Stanford out with different projects. And we love this school. We love this institution. My wife and I have spent a lot of time here. Frankly, it's fun to indoctrinate our kids to root for Stanford. And there's the Stanford tree. And we'll keep helping Stanford with projects. And I think also the energy around college campuses is really fun. You get to learn from folks. There's interesting things going on. And
you are so right. I mean, part of the reason I love my job is just to be around really smart people engaging in really interesting ideas. I can only imagine the high school football team that you coach, how honored and privileged they feel to have someone of your caliber. As a coach, your job is to help your players be the best they can be at their sport, but also in their lives. How do you approach that dual task, and are there specific life lessons you try to inculcate in your students?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think that is a big question for youth sports, high school sports. I mean, that right there. And there's the Positive Coaching Alliance, which is a nonprofit that does a lot of amazing work.
And they came out of Stanford.
Yeah, they have a lot of roots here. And they do amazing work, and they have a double goal: win at the game, win at life, right? And we need to be sophisticated enough to hold both,
right? And
winning at life, very, very important. Should not come at the expense, or winning in the game should not come at the expense of sort of winning at life. So I'm a believer in that. If anybody's interested, definitely seek out their materials. I think they do amazing work. And I think. One, it's fun to teach football. I think without being too explicit about the life lessons you learn, like showing up on time, showing up ready for practice. You need to do that to win the game, right? You need to practice with urgency. We talk about it, So some of those life lessons, communicating with players has been really interesting. Coaching is hard. I mean, coaching freshman football, I got nervous calling plays. I played in conference championship games and bowl games, and I was nervous, calling plays for these guys. And I felt it physiologically, and I messed up. And I shouldn't have called that. I shouldn't have called that. Sit down and go through it. Okay, next time, learn from it. There. So it's a lot of fun. You realize too, you've got to let those kids be themselves. I view practice time and this time that they get on the field in the game time is almost sacred. They put their phones away. They're with each other for 2 hours, an hour and a half. They're struggling together. They're having to. They're in conflict with each other, and then a minute later they're collaborating with each other. It's a. I think there are really powerful lessons that exist in there, and frankly, part of at least my personal challenge is to start drawing those lessons out more and figure and getting a better grasp of them.
I just have to comment. I as a father of two boys who played sports, there'd be times where you'd yell at the coach or say that was a bad play. I find it. I just can't imagine a parent saying, Andrew Luck made the wrong play. I would be very intimidated to question your play calling. But this notion of teaching life skills, especially to young boys, I think young people have challenges that I certainly never experienced today, but especially for young boys as they become young men, to really help them in the way that you're doing is so critical, because many of them are not going to go beyond high school sports, just the way it works, and to learn those skills, camaraderie, timeliness, how to communicate, how to have conflict productively, how to collaborate, how to have a relationship with another person in a meaningful way. I think that's fantastic. Andrew, this has been a true pleasure to chat with you. Before we end, I'd like to ask 3 questions of everybody I interview. 2 are similar, and then 1 I create just for you. You up for that?
Please.
You have always struck me as somebody who is very articulate. You communicate very efficiently, very effectively. Talk to me about where that came from. Is that something that existed in your family? Did you work on it? Is it just part of who you are? You communicate well. How did that come about?
I grew up in an amazing household with a mom and dad that, imbued with love and
Right.
books and just fun and sports. And I think I'm tight with all my siblings and my parents. And
Right.
so that I think very much. And my father had somewhat of a public role growing up as a sports executive, and he played quarterback in the NFL, and so he would take me around, and we'd be in the car, and he'd call into a radio show to talk about the Houston Dynamo who he was running at the time, or something else, or I'd go to charity events, and he was the MC. So I was dragged around by my dad to these different
Right.
things, and I certainly think and watching our daughters now watch the world, I'm realizing, oh my gosh, you learn from, at least I learned from watching my dad, especially in the public communications sector, if you will, and sort of bigger messaging to audiences and groups. And my mom is an incredibly empathic person, incredibly empathic woman, and there's a lot of care and a lot of tenderness from her. And so I learned a lot from both of them in separate ways. And when I think about training for a quarterback, no pun intended, I got lucky. My dad, talking to the media. I was a kid growing up watching that, and when I, there were those commercials about you turn into your father, like, oh God, I'm turning into my dad when I hear myself talk. But so I'm grateful for both of them.
And it sounds like you're very cognizant of the role modeling you're doing for your daughters, which is important as well. Let me ask you question number 2. Who is a communicator that you admire and why, beyond your father?
Yeah, communicator that I admire. I was going through a tough time with injuries during a spell of my NFL career, and my physical therapist ended up spending a lot of time with a Dutch man, someone from the Netherlands named Willem Kramer, and he was so direct. And he was Dutch, so there's sort of a little bit of a meme about the Dutch and direct and cut through the fluff and leave zero room for ambiguity. And I needed that at that time. And I needed directness. I didn't need any of the communication with me laced with, oh, he's a quarterback, or it was direct communication, human to human. And I did not like it often, but I needed to hear it. And it took time to hear some of the things, and he listened, and he was just there, and we worked together for a while. And Nicole, my wife, was sort of brought into this this communication circle, and he helped me raise questions that I had about myself, and it was okay to answer them, and it was okay if I didn't have the perfect answer. It was a safe place, talking about psychologically safe space, direct communication, a listener. If he was wronged by me, he would share it. There was no sugarcoating it, and we celebrated victories together. The full spectrum, and I really needed that at that point in my life.
You are the first person in our 150 guests to name a physical therapist. We get poets, we get presidents. That's great. And it sounds like the directness and doing what was needed in those moments is what led you to select him. Final question. What are the first 3 ingredients that go into a successful communication recipe?
Boy. 2 come to mind. First of all, respect.
Yeah.
Clarity. And I want to say reciprocity.
Okay. Respect and clarity. Clearly, respect is a theme across many of the answers and ideas you shared. Clarity, I can imagine, as somebody who did the work that you did, being very clear. Reciprocity, listening, being receptive instead of it certainly makes a lot of sense. Often people see communication as a very directive thing, but I think to be a recipient and be in that moment and co-create something is really powerful. Andrew, this has been fantastic. Thank you for sharing your insights that come from a very different domain than many of us live in, but they directly apply to how we live our lives, how we manage our careers. It was a true pleasure to chat with you. Thank you for reminding us of the importance of relationships, the importance of connection, and the importance of practice.
Oh, my honor. This was incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.